Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Ladies, this video is for us. This video is all the things that we've been told. The big con, the lies that we all bought. And most importantly, the ones we can choose to not support anymore. Before I go on with this video, I have to preface it. That is Primo. That is my 135-pound Rottweiler, who is always at my feet and who will do this all throughout the video. He lays here, I say something. He confirms that he's listening to what I'm saying. He says, "Hell yeah, Mom," with that snore. So stick around and let's chat. Chat about the big con that we all bought and that we can choose to not buy anymore. Some of you know that 6 months ago, I closed my business. I closed that business after building it for 15 years. And in the last 6 months, I've led a very quiet life. I've been very self-reflective. I've always been self-reflective and always tried to be very self-aware. I've always been trying to find some improvement and progress with myself to be the best self that I could possibly be. And I often find myself, as I reflect back over my life, as someone who has witnessed the world around me, rather than jumping into the center and the fray and the chaos and the activity. I've always circled around it. I'm not an innovator, but I'm an improver, if that makes sense. I can take something that's already built and I can find the weakness and I can come up with a creative plan to improve it and build upon it. And over the last 6 months, I've become more aware of the world around me. The chaos, the distractions that are always there, screaming for our attention. We live in a constant state of distraction. And more, I'm realizing that it's not chaos for the sake of chaos, but it's chaos with design. Designed to keep us distracted. Particularly women, because women have been subdued into submission in society forever. I can't think of a time that we weren't second-class citizens. We weren't upholding civilization, not being the backbone, holding it all together. And so I want to give us some credit because we've done it with grace, we've done it with patience, and we've done it well. But I think we've really just allowed ourselves to be sedated, lulled into submission and acceptance because we've never had power before, and therefore we don't know what we don't know, and we accept what is, right? Because a woman seeking power, well, she's overly ambitious. Isn't she a bitch? Something wrong with her. She can't be trusted. Isn't a woman too emotional? What about that time of the month? Or when she's in menopause or perimenopause, women can get crazy. Well, I would argue, look at the world around us. It's fucking crazy. And it's run by everybody but us. A lot of power in the hands of men, particularly in the hands of corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations. And we all fall victim to this because we are the workers, right? We're the worker bees. And we just plug along, just trying to get along, just trying to live our lives and be left alone. Particularly if you're Gen X, you're just like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm surviving over here. I've managed this far and this long by myself. I don't want any attention. I'm just going to go about my day. You know, I wouldn't consider myself a very political person. I vote. I am not out there, marching. I wouldn't consider myself as somebody who's actively trying to change the system. Maybe I should. I don't know. I vote. And I witness. And I see clearly, particularly over the last 6 months, because I don't have distraction or as much distraction as I had prior. I'm living a fairly quiet life, and I'm noticing that I'm getting a little frustrated. Here I am, 55. I'm in menopause, and I'm wondering how we've all been lulled into this position, into the world as it is, to the chaos, to the inequality, to the injustice. I feel like as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, I have a daughter, I have 2 beautiful granddaughters, and I think about the blessing that I, as a woman, was given, born in 1970, shortly after Roe versus Wade was passed. ERA was in the move. Women were standing up. They were burning their bras. And somehow we settled. They allowed us to open up our own bank account without our husband in the 70s. They allowed us to get a credit card. Imagine that. Prior to the 1970s, a woman couldn't get her own bank account. That's in my lifetime. And ERA was never passed. And if you know your history, and I'm not a historian, but I know enough to know that it wasn't passed because other women stood in the way. It was women fighting against women. One side wanted an equal rights amendment for equal pay, equal rights. The other side wanted a traditional role in society. And their biggest fear was that they would get drafted, and so they fought against it. And I see today in this atmosphere those same arguments rising up from a younger generation, Gen Z. I see it on social media. Young women advocating to take the vote away from women because women should be in synchronicity with their husbands. And so they don't need a vote. So one family, one vote. The man can vote, and the woman doesn't need a vote. And I find this shocking, this propaganda on social media. It's finding its way to me, and I'm the wrong one for that. And then another young woman out there on social media talking about, and I'm trying to quote this, so don't hold me exactly to it, but basically she's saying women should be having more babies. They should be doing it younger and before they're even financially prepared for it. I'm like, what? Now, I was a young woman. I was 20 when I was having babies. That's young. I'm 55. My daughter is 36. My son's 35. I was young. I was ill-prepared. I was not financially ready, and it was a struggle. But in this day and age, to see young women spreading propaganda like that, give up your vote, have babies, and not be financially secure as a woman, to be totally dependent on someone else for your survival of yourself and your children, is shocking to me. And it shows that Gen Z, I don't think it's so much millennials, I could be mistaken, but Gen Z is so uneducated. That's Primo. Get ready for that. Every time I land something, he does that. He seems to be listening to me and understand. Good boy, Primo. And we've gotten away from empowering women. And there's a lot of propaganda about trad wives. And let me remind you, it was the trad wives that fought against the ERA. And because of that, to this day, women still don't get equal pay to men. Women's health is still not studied. All the studies are done on men. And we find now that Gen X is entering menopause and in menopause, that there are no studies to go on. And this is such a big part of women's health. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me as someone who was born in 1970, who can remember as a little child the fight for equal rights, can remember the way women were treated. I remember as a young girl seeing women beaten by their husbands, as neighbors, women running out into the streets, screaming out of their houses because they were being beaten by their husband, and their husband chasing them and grabbing them by the hair and dragging them back in. I remember the cops showing up and not being able to do anything because it was a domestic dispute. It was acceptable to beat your wife. And I don't think this younger generation was ever exposed to it because they were protected by their moms and their grandmoms, the ones that fought the good fight to ensure that that shit didn't happen to them and they didn't have to see it. I remember, and leave a comment if you can remember this, maybe it was early 80s, late 70s, I'm not sure of the date, but there was a made-for-TV movie. Farrah Fawcett starred in it, and it was called Extremities. And that whole movie was her getting her ass beat by a man. And due to that movie, I remember people were shocked all across the country, even though it was fairly common to happen. Maybe it was a class thing, but in the class I grew up in, it wasn't uncommon. And anyway, the whole country was talking about it. It was on the news. It was up. People were talking on talk shows. And I think it was primarily that forced our government to put revenue behind opening women and children's shelters and writing legislation to protect women against violence. And here we are. These young women all over social media talking about having babies and supporting babies and being trad wives. Yet they're on social media doing these forums, these talks. They're not home pregnant. They're making some money. They're out there making bank. Miss, go home, support your man, have more babies, pray, A lot of them are talking the talk, but they're not actually doing what they claim or believe or are saying to other women. It's good for you, but me, I'm going to be out here making bait, girl. I'm going to be all over the social media. Getting a check. But not you. You should be home. You should be home like a good Christian woman. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I think, particularly Gen X women, it's like they gave us a sedative. And we've just been plugging away, working, taking care of kids, family, parents now, grandchildren now, being the backbone as we always have been, holding it all together, never complaining. At the end of the day, if there's a little time for ourselves, we're usually exhausted. I think it really, really hit me when Roe was turned over, Roe versus Wade was turned over. Because I was born, or actually Roe versus Wade was enacted into law maybe 3-4 years after I was born. So I've always had that benefit of women's health. And it was precedent, so I didn't have to worry about it. And when I needed it, when I miscarried and I needed to go to the hospital, it was there for me. And now women are bleeding out. They're being told to go home until the miscarriage is complete. And they become sick. And they're refused health care. And I find that shocking. I remember when it was announced on the news that the Supreme Court had overturned it. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Now, I don't care what your views are. This is purely about rights. There is not one legislative law on a man's body. There is nothing that says a man has to go home and bleed out and suffer to the verge of death before he can be treated. And yet it's acceptable for women. And I find while we're being distracted and entertained and sedated, when we turn our heads because it just seems like such a big problem and we feel so powerless, the ERA is still unratified. Institutions are failing women. And our algorithms serve us morning routines, serve us glow-ups. Pay attention to this. Because a woman working on her skincare routine, she isn't organizing. She isn't legislating. She isn't demanding equality. She's preoccupied and sedated and lulled into quiet. Here's the latest fashion haul. Buy this at the Sephora sale. While we're focused on me, my wants, keeping up with the Joneses, while I'm optimizing myself, I'm not focusing on all of us. I'm not focusing on me and you, sister. Where they're literally preparing us to take away the vote, just like they were preparing us to take away Roe. might get passed, it might not. Oh, there's this, that, this, that. They were fighting that for years. And this Supreme Court, this one, finally said, yeah, you're right. It's not a privacy issue. What? What? What happens to my body, in my bedroom, in my doctor's office, is not a privacy issue? I'm not entitled to privacy as a woman? That's not my right? But a man wants to get Viagra. That's private, right? He can use it for his stuff. But we can't take care of our stuff. I also heard that they have the technology to give men birth control. Does a man take it? No. That's a woman's responsibility. When we are at a certain level of optimization, productivity, beauty, then we can be taken seriously, and anything else isn't. Too old, too young, too pretty, not pretty enough. Too sexy, not sexy enough. Too smart, not smart enough. Too thin, not thin enough. Too heavy, right? They keep us chasing the dragon, so to speak, right? Because you can never quite get it, right? Chasing our tails, fighting amongst each other. And to this day, women are fighting with each other. Women out there is spreading propaganda about giving up their rights. They don't need them. They don't want the right to vote. They don't need women's health care. They don't believe in choice. And they also don't believe in supporting women in health, supporting women through maternity leave, supporting women and children in poverty, feeding children. No, then you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you're independent and you shouldn't have had children unless you could support it. But yet they're telling us to have more children even before we're prepared. You see, it's all about power. Controlling women. If they can control us, we won't fight for our rights, fight for power, and fight for representation. We can keep buying stuff and keep the GDP going higher and higher. Keep these multi-billion-dollar corporations profiting for shareholders. Keep fighting each other, keep pushing each other. I find issue with any person in general, but particularly women who say vocally and loudly that they don't need or want the right to vote, and therefore no other women should. They don't want the right to choose, and therefore no other woman should. They don't want women working. Women should be home, taking care of their man and their children and the family. And so that's their belief, and every woman should do it. They don't want to be forced to go to work. They don't want to be forced to enroll in the armed forces. And I say to these women, nobody's forcing you to do anything. Don't want to work? Don't work. Don't want to vote? Don't vote. Don't want to have proper health care elect not to get it. Stay home and bleed to death. Because your inexperience, your ignorance, it's showing. Careful now, girl. I know many women. I will state one instance of a woman I've known who had 3 beautiful children, was married. And she would tell everybody that would listen she was against abortion. And she would never have an abortion, and she knew somebody that could have been aborted because that person was a result of rape. So she couldn't be for the right to choose. Meanwhile, most women I know have needed that health care at one point or another, whether by choice or by need. The reason they had it is nobody else's business. But this one woman, she was proud of what she stood for. And I respected it. I didn't fight her on it. Don't want an abortion, don't need an abortion, don't get an abortion. She had 3 beautiful young children, and she got pregnant with her 4th. And she realized very quickly what a 4th child would do to their family. She would not be able to work any longer. They were barely getting by. It was going to create a hardship for their other children. And it was going to create stress on her marriage. At that time, she could not find a positive outcome of having a 4th child. She had always been against abortion. And I bring this up because you don't know what you don't know. And she had that abortion, even though she was against it her whole life. When she needed it, when she thought it was going to harm her family to add to it, when it came to her, now she changed her mind. But she was very vocal about how everybody else should do it. And these young women are the same to me. They don't know what they don't know. And someday they'll wake up. Someday they will have a need for help and assistance because that man that they so believe in, nobody gets married to get divorced, but shit happens. Marriages fall apart. Men abandon women all the time. Men walk away from their families. And if that should ever happen to those young women, the rest of us will be here fighting for their rights. This coming from a woman of a divorced mother who was left by a man, my father, to have another family. And he supported that family. He never paid my mother a dime of alimony or child support. Not a fucking dime. So my mother was left to support a child in the 70s by herself. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy for her. I remember the only thing to eat in that house at one time was a can of green beans. I remember eating green beans out of the can, cold, because that's all there was to eat. So these women out here spreading propaganda because they just don't know any better need to be taught And I think it's Gen X women that need to stop protecting these younger women and start talking about our experiences and reminding them of the struggles of our mothers and grandmothers. They don't know what they don't know. And we need to call out these women. They're young, they're naive. But it's not something that we can do by looking away, by remaining silent, choosing to be sedated and distracted. Maybe you don't need it for yourself. I certainly, at 55, I'm never going to have children again. Most of my life is behind me. I have everything I need. I can still vote. But I'm thinking less about me, the I, and more about the we, me and you and my granddaughters. I think about my granddaughters and my daughter needing health care and being refused. I think about the potential of their right to be represented in government taken away. I think about when those rights, should they be taken away, the power and control society and men will have over women. And I always remember that woman running out into the street, screaming and being dragged back into her house by her hair, by a man who claimed to love her and abused her. I think about the rape academy, women drugged into sleep by men they thought loved them. I think about the Epstein files, all those young girls and women, some children, being trafficked terribly by men with great power. And to this day, they're not being held accountable. They're being protected. And it's because women are not being represented. And men are not protecting women, they're protecting other men. Now, I also have a husband and a son. I love men. But those are the only two men I trust. That's it. When I leave the house, I'm always scanning for danger. And as another woman, you know what it's like to walk in a garage at dark by yourself. You know what it's like to walk out into a parking lot. You know what it's like to talk to a man who isn't looking at your eyes. You know all the things about being a woman. And we allow this to continue for our daughters and our granddaughters. In my lifetime, we've lost rights for our daughters and our granddaughters, rights given to us by our mothers and grandmothers, fought for us, and we let it all slip away because we were distracted and sedated by fashion and skincare and makeup and cars, homes, fitness routines, and productivity hacks. We let it all slip away because we allowed ourselves to feel small and powerless. We've been asleep, ladies. And I'm calling all my Gen X women. We've been told that we shouldn't be heard until spoken to keep quiet, take care of ourselves, to fade into the background. If we don't bother them, they won't bother us. And I'm saying now it's time to wake up, to open our eyes and use our power. The power of the purse. If you can't go out and march, withhold your attention, withhold your dollars. We are far more powerful than we think, than we've been told. We are more than half of the population, and we determine what our households spend money on. We decide what companies get our money. We decide who gets our attention. And that's far more powerful than any march. Maybe it's time for a broad boycott to hold our representatives accountable. We want our rights, and we want our protections equal to a man. And no, we will not give up our vote. In fact, we're going to show up in masses and vote you all out. We want our children fed and protected, the weakest and poorest among us. We want our families to have health care. We are far more powerful. And these major corporations, this bro-oligarchy, we've let them believe they have power. What is it, 8, 10 guys? There are so many women in this country and around the world. And if we stop fighting each other, and we start looking at each other and stop picking apart all these little beliefs, but stand for something that benefits all of us, we give up our selfish I and look at the broader we, imagine what we could do. Imagine it. Imagine sending your kids to school and not having to worry about them being shot. Imagine your kids not having to do shooter drills in schools. Imagine being able to go to the hospital and get the health care that you deserve and need. Imagine having research into our health, women's health, which is desperately needed. Imagine having every right a man has. Imagine getting paid the same amount for any job as a man would get paid. Imagine being able to take time while supporting this country and your family to give birth and bond with your children. Imagine the peace and stability we could force this country into. You see, they say women are emotional. I'm looking around and I'm kind of thinking the guys are. And the women in government, it's almost like they're happy to be near the table, close to power. They're afraid to grab it. It's kind of like if they're close to it, they won't get hurt by it. But that's the thing about power. It's hungry, and it's never satisfied. And right now we see power directing itself at minorities and the weakest among us, pulling back voting rights. What makes you think they're not going to do that to women too? We're next, ladies. We're next. Yeah. Couldn't happen, right? Not going to happen to us. We thought the same thing about Roe. And as long as they keep us distracted, we're not legislating, we're not standing up, we're not speaking out, And we're not boycotting these companies, all of them, that aren't lobbying for us. Because if they can lobby for tech, they can lobby for oil, they can lobby for health insurance. Worldwide, multi-billion-dollar corporations that earn off the backs and dollars of women, they should be up there on Capitol Hill, lobbying for us. Because without our dollars, they ain't nothing. And if it works for those oil people and the AI oligarchy and the big corporations, all led by men, why can't it work for us too? Just some thoughts. And remember, they don't need to silence us. They just need to keep us busy and distracted. And the beauty is, we get to choose.